When I touched my grandmother's hand, it burned. Not from warmth, but from abandonment. Her skin was hot with fever, her lips dry, her breath shallow. And beside her bed, taped to a grocery bag, was a note in my mother's handwriting. Vegas for the weekend, back Wednesday. Don't worry, Mom, we deserve a break. The kind of sentence you write when your heart's already gone cold. That was the night I stopped believing family meant love. And the night I realized my name, Eugenette Blackwood, was still written on the paper that let them do this. The air inside the house felt wrong, quiet in a way that pressed against my chest. Each breath came out white, a ghost of heat that didn't belong here. I moved through the hallway, where the wallpaper had curled at the edges, the air carrying the faint scent of damp wood and old medicine. No one answered when I called her name, only the sound of the floorboards creaking under my boots. A photo on the wall had slipped sideways. My mother, my father, my grandmother, and me, smiling against the summer sun. I straightened it out without thinking, my fingers shaking. The bedroom door was half open. Inside, she lay curled beneath a thin blanket, the color drained from her face, sweat glistening on her forehead. The old lamp buzzed, throwing a weak pool of yellow light over the bed. I reached out and touched her wrist. Her skin burned. Her pulse stumbled beneath my fingers. There, but fragile. On the nightstand, a bottle of antibiotics sat empty. The label was faded, the expiration date years old. Next to it, taped to a crumpled grocery bag, was a note written in my mother's looping cursive. Vegas for the weekend. Back Wednesday. Don't worry, Mom. We deserve a break. The words stung more than the cold. I stood there for a long moment, the sound of the refrigerator clicking off in the kitchen like a final exhale. I found a towel, ran it under cold water, and pressed it gently to her forehead. When I tried to lift her head to give her water, her lips parted, and a hoarse whisper slipped out. Ginny Bird, you came back. Her voice broke something open inside me. That name, one I hadn't heard since I was a child, hit harder than any accusation could. I swallowed the ache that rose in my throat. I wrapped her tighter in the blanket and turned toward the old heater in the corner. The dial stuck halfway before groaning to life, sputtering heat like a wounded heart learning to beat again. Slowly, the air began to move, carrying a hint of warmth back into the room. I sat beside her, listening to the sound of the heater's uneven rhythm. I had spent years bringing strangers back from the edge of death. Maybe it was time to try saving the only family I had left. The clock on the wall ticked once, then stopped at 11:59. The house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for heat, for truth, for morning. Morning light crept through the curtains, thin and cold, cutting across stacks of unopened mail on the kitchen table. I started cleaning out of habit, more to quiet the noise in my head than to make order. Dust floated through the air, glinting in that pale light like ash. When I brushed aside a pile of envelopes, I saw the red stamps, past due, on every bill, the electric, the water, even the heating oil. Then a thicker envelope caught my eye. It wasn't a bill. It was a property transfer, notarized in black ink, bearing a company name I didn't recognize at first, Blackwood Realty LLC. My stomach dropped. The last name felt like a signature carved into betrayal. From the bedroom, a frail voice called, "They'll be back soon, won't they?" I couldn't bring myself to answer. I only said, softly, "Try to rest." I turned on my father's old computer. It whined to life, the hum filling the silence like a guilty confession. Inside his email drafts, the records were still there. Bank transfers, dated only a week ago. $12,000 moved out of my grandmother's account, labeled care expenses. They weren't caring for her. They were spending her. By the time the sun began to fade, I couldn't breathe inside that house anymore. I walked next door to the Kingsleys, the neighbors who'd known my grandmother since the 70s. They looked startled to see me. "Oh, we thought she'd moved," Mrs. Kingsley said, lowering her voice. "Your folks told everyone she's at Green Pines Care Home. We even sent a card." Her husband hesitated, then added quietly, "We heard her coughing one night. Called your mom. She said it was the TV." Something cold ran through me, deeper than anger. The whole town had been fooled. Back inside, I sat by her bed, staring at her sleeping face. I remembered every missed call, every message I'd ignored because I was too busy saving someone else. Neglect doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it looks like silence. I gathered the evidence, the Vegas note, the bills, the transfer papers, and photographed each one. Then I whispered to her, "They won't get away with this." The refrigerator light flickered once, twice, before dying out. In the dim room, the pulse of that light felt like a warning. The truth was waking up. It was past midnight when I heard her whisper my childhood name again. Ginny Bird. I went to her room. The fever had broken a little. Her eyes were clearer now. The lamp cast a warm circle over her quilt. And for the first time, she looked less like someone dying and more like someone remembering. "Your granddad used to say," she murmured, "truth keeps the roof from collapsing." He wasn't wrong. She paused, breath trembling. "I know what Maeve and Richard have been doing, but I kept quiet. I didn't want this house torn apart before its time." Her voice was raspy but firm. "Don't let my house die dishonest." She motioned toward the nightstand. Top drawer, the tin box. It was old, the kind of thing you keep buttons in, faded blue, edges dented. Inside lay a folded paper, a wedding photo, a tiny brass key, and a scrap of yellowed note, for Ginny, when truth feels heavy. The folded paper was a half-written will, the handwriting delicate but strong. The last line hit like a blade. All remaining assets to be transferred to Eugenie Blackwood's medical trust. I froze. I was the heir. They'd known and buried it. My chest burned, rage tangled with guilt. I looked at her, unable to speak. She only smiled faintly. "Don't hate them, Ginny. Just remember who you are." Tears blurred the edges of everything. "I'm the daughter of the people who left you," I said, "and the granddaughter of the woman they couldn't kill with neglect." She reached for my hand, and her grip, though weak, was steady. I tucked the blanket around her, turned the heater higher, and stepped outside for air. Snow had begun to fall, soft, relentless, like truth finding its way through every crack. "If truth is surgery," I whispered into the cold, "then it's time to operate." Somewhere inside, the old house groaned, as if it understood the incision had just begun. In the operating room, I once made an 8-inch incision to save a heart. Tonight, I opened my father's drawer, and the cut went deeper. Inside the safe, unlocked by the small brass key from my grandmother's tin box, was a red leather ledger. The paper smelled of dust and smoke. Every line was careful, calculated. Home repair, $1,200. Medication, $800. Vegas trip deposit, $4,500. Each number pulsed like a heartbeat gone wrong. They had turned elder care into a cover for theft. In the second drawer, I found a folder labeled Medical Power of Attorney. My name sprawled across the bottom. I remembered signing it at 25. My mother smiling, saying it was for emergency consent. I never read the fine print. That one signature had given them total control over my grandmother's life and money. My hands shook. The same hands that saved lives had condemned hers. I photographed every page, then sent them to Lena Mercer at APS. Her voice over the phone was calm. "If you expose this, you're naming yourself as part of it." "I know," I said, "but if I don't, it'll keep bleeding." I wrote in my journal, "I used to fix hearts. Now I'm dissecting a family. Tomorrow." I'd open the basement. The basement reeked of mildew and ash, as if the floorboards had absorbed every secret. My flashlight swept across boxes labeled taxes, medical, insurance. One folder read Eleanor Blackwood, medical file. Inside, a report recommending assisted care. The last line chilled me. Family declined. They hadn't forgotten her. They'd refused her. Deeper in the box, I found printed emails. Sell the lake house before she realizes anything. Another. She won't survive winter anyway. They'd planned for her death like it was an inheritance. Rage steadied my hands. I filmed every file, whispering, "I used to chart vitals. Now I'm charting sins." When I returned upstairs, I heard her faint voice through the dark. "Your mother used to hum when she lied." The memory struck me. My mother humming that same tune when she slid the paper across the table years ago. The betrayal had begun with music. I sent everything to Lena. Her reply came fast. "APS will review. Don't destroy originals. This is criminal-level evidence." Outside, the lake wind howled. I stepped onto the porch, holding the box tight. Under the flashlight, the papers glowed white-hot against the snow. The truth was alive now, and it was hungry. The room glowed softly in candlelight, every shadow stretching long across the walls. I set the camera on the dresser, pointing it toward her. The lens caught her eyes, clouded with age, but still clear enough to see everything I'd been hiding. "You're sure you want to record this?" she asked. I nodded. "It's time someone does." She straightened her frail shoulders, silver hair falling loosely around her face. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "My name is Eleanor Blackwood. I am 85 years old. I was left alone with a fever of 102 while my daughter and her husband went to Las Vegas. They took what wasn't theirs, not just money, but my dignity. But I'm not angry. I'm recording this because people like me vanish quietly, and silence should never be a family tradition." She paused, catching her breath. "Love isn't a postcard from Vegas. It's a daily decision." When I stopped the recording, my throat tightened. I couldn't speak. The truth had its own pulse in that room. Then she turned her head toward me. "Ginny, you know you signed that paper, right?" "What paper?" "The one that gave them power over me." Her words cut through me. I had forgotten. I had signed the medical proxy when I was 25, trusting my parents without reading a word. "You gave them the pen, my girl," she said. "I don't blame you. But truth doesn't care about intentions. It hit me like an open wound. The justice I was chasing would condemn me, too. I turned the camera back toward myself, hit record, and forced the words out. "If I was part of the harm, I'll be part of the healing." The red light blinked, witness to my confession. The phone rang before I could breathe again. Maeve's name lit up the screen. "Your father hit the jackpot. Ginny, we'll bring souvenirs," she said, laughing. "Bring your conscience instead," I replied. Silence. Then the line went dead. They hadn't changed. They were still celebrating with stolen air in their lungs. I gathered every document, every video, every photo, and sent them in a secure email to Lena Mercer. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. Her voice was low but urgent. "Jen, your APS is already looking into them. There were other complaints, from their old clinic." "What kind of complaints?" "Stealing from elderly patients." It wasn't just greed, it was a pattern. By the time I hung up, my grandmother had drifted to sleep, her breathing calm. The candle had melted halfway down. I sat in the dim glow, watching the red light on the camera still blinking. Truth was recording now. It didn't need permission anymore. Outside, snow began to fall, thin flakes catching in the reflection of the glass. For the first time, the house wasn't warmed by fire, but by the quiet heat of truth. The first message came before sunrise. "Dr. Blackwood, is it true you reported your parents for elder neglect?" The name of a local reporter glowed on my screen. My pulse kicked like it used to before a difficult surgery. The storm had found me again. By noon, the headlines spread. "Doctor Who let a patient die, now accuses her parents." The story twisted like barbed wire, mixing my past with their present. APS paused its investigation, citing a potential conflict of interest. My name was once again a scandal. The truth I'd set free had turned on me. That night, Lena called. "They're trying to discredit you. Don't feed it. Stay silent." Silence was my first mistake, I said. I won't repeat it. I uploaded the video of my grandmother's testimony and sent it to the local news. Within hours, it was everywhere. Brave woman exposes family abuse. Heartbreaking truth about elder neglect. But the comments split in half. She's brave. She's ungrateful. She sold her parents for attention. Then came the email from the hospital board in Boston. Your reinstatement will be reviewed due to current controversy. I stared at the words until they blurred. I'd once lost a patient because I followed procedure. Now I was losing my career because I followed my heart. That evening, wind howled outside, carrying the sound of ice cracking off the roof. My grandmother stirred in her sleep. I sat beside her until her eyes opened slightly. Don't let them turn truth into another weapon, she whispered. Then what do I do? Wait. Justice moves slower than guilt, but it always arrives. Later that night, my phone rang again. No caller ID, just static and a man's voice. Tell your folks to lawyer up. APS is filing federal charges. Then silence. I lowered the phone, staring at the snow piling against the window. The light inside flickered, the house glowing like a heart under frost. For once, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like a countdown. Thanksgiving. The house smelled of cinnamon and medicine, warm but wordless. Even the clock seemed afraid to tick. My grandmother sat wrapped in a gray blanket, eyes steady. The laptop waited, the paused frame of her confession glowing on the TV. The front door burst open, cold air, laughter, perfume. Ginny, what a surprise! My mother chirped. My father followed, reeking of whiskey. How's Mom? We said we'd be back Wednesday. It's Thursday, I said. Silence cracked like glass. My grandmother coughed. You came back to the scene, at least. Sit down, I ordered. They did. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room. My children left me with a fever of 102 while they enjoyed Las Vegas. They took what wasn't theirs, my dignity. My mother jumped up. You manipulated her. No, I said. You made her live it. I laid out the red folder, bank records, the email she won't survive winter anyway. A knock came. Lena Mercer entered, badge flashing. We're here to collect statements. You called the police? Not yet, I said. She did. My grandmother smiled faintly. This home was built with truth. Trade it for lies. You'll own ashes. The video ended. Justice stood quietly in the firelight. After everyone left the table, the house fell into a fragile quiet. Only the kettle hissed, and the scent of burnt wood lingered in the air. I sat by the window, watching my parents in the living room, my mother trembling, my father bowed, the fire's reflection flickering across faces finally stripped of excuses. Outside, snow fell thick and white, like a shroud trying to hide what had already been seen. By morning, Lena returned with 2 APS officers. We're proceeding with charges of financial exploitation and elder neglect, she said, sliding papers across the table. You'll need to testify. I looked at my grandmother. She shook her head gently. Justice isn't revenge. Ginny, let them fix what's broken while they still can kneel. I withdrew the criminal claim. Instead, they would return everything, money, property, dignity, and stay under state supervision to care for her. No prison walls, just living consequences. That night, I stepped onto the porch. The red ledger in my hands, I struck a match. I used to burn through heart tissue with lasers, I whispered. Tonight, I burn through lies with fire. The pages curled, glowing orange against the snow. Later, my grandmother rewrote her will, leaving the lake house to a fund for abandoned elders. That's your real inheritance, Ginny, the kind that can't be spent. My parents mended the roof in silence. No apologies, only penance. I wrote in my journal, they're not forgiven. They're just learning how to be human again. A month later, Lake Champlain was frozen solid. The world outside painted in white silence. But the house wasn't cold anymore. The smell of beef stew filled the air, while an old radio hummed, "You Are My Sunshine." My grandmother sat in her armchair, knitting with calm, deliberate hands. My parents stayed busy, my father fixing the stairs, my mother wiping the counter, sleeves rolled up, no words, no escape. Yet they stayed. I set a bowl of soup before my grandmother. She tasted it and smiled. Hot, strong, and honest. Just how I like it. My mother washed dishes in silence, her bare hands red from the cold water. My father replaced the cracked windowpane, breath fogging the glass. For once, I thought, they're fixing instead of hiding. Then my grandmother handed me a small tin box, the same one from her nightstand. Inside lay a new note in her shaky handwriting. To Ginny Bird, you kept your promise. Remember, love is a decision, not an instinct. Snow fell outside as the light turned gold. I stepped onto the porch, holding the USB labeled Truth One. The frozen lake glimmered beneath the sunset. Some hearts stop from neglect, I whispered. Some heal because someone came back in time. Behind me, the chimney smoked. The windows glowed. I looked back at the house and smiled. I hadn't just saved her life. I'd revived our name. Justice had finished its work. Compassion had begun its own, and 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 had begun